Hello and welcome to the Angle on Producer Summer Camp Series. You might be wondering, Carolina, why are you dressed like a quasi-semi camp counselor? Have you finally lost it? And I'm pleased to tell you that no. Our team is taking a brief summer break and we couldn't stand the thought of leaving you all summer without any episodes. So we put together 8 weeks worth of episodes that speak to the central question of our show. What makes an exceptional producer? Tune in each week to unlock a new producing lesson with one of your summer camp counselors, aka an industry vet who has seen it all and done it all. From writers to producers, showrunners, and everyone in between. By the end of summer, you'll have unlocked a treasure trove of producing wisdom to help you along your filmmaking journey. If you're just joining us, my name is Carolina Groppa, and I am an Emmy-nominated film and TV producer. And I also host the podcast Angle on Producers, taking you behind the scenes and into the shoes of producers across all corners of the entertainment industry. So put on your hat, lather up your sunscreen, and get ready to meet your first camp counselor, Erin O'Malley. Erin has been the executive producer behind some of the most beloved shows of the past 2 decades, from Curb Your Enthusiasm to New Girl to Ali G and so many in between. In this episode, she talks about using her moral compass as a guide to navigating the sometimes scary forest of the film industry. Through hard work, following her gut, and generally being a nice person, Erin has carved out a space in the industry as a revered and respected executive producer. Since this recording, she's also really cemented herself as a director. She demonstrates how being true to yourself can be one of the best tools in your toolkit for forging your own path. So, without further ado, here's Erin. I was curious, when you read your own bio, are you as impressed with yourself as I am?
No, I don't think so.
What do you mean?
That's a really funny question.
I mean,
I'm very proud of it.
Hell. Okay.
I'm super duper proud of it. Yes.
Yeah.
I often wonder, like, what people think when they see it. Do they think that, wow, all she does it, like, I used to think at the beginning, like 10 years ago, that people thought all I did were I was the crazy comedy producer, like the one who would do like the weird shit, you know.
Interesting.
But between Ali G, Sarah Silverman program, and Curb, it was like, oh, she's that person, you know. And then I went a little more mainstream with like network sitcoms, and I think then it just became like, do people think all I do is like half-hour comedy? Which kind of I do, but you know what I mean. But it's so funny because it's not at all what I got in the industry to do.
Which is why it's so amazing. Like, we create a perception of who we think someone is and what their path has been like just based on their bio. And I was talking to a friend about writing cover letters, which is something that we don't do in our industry, but how it's such a specific craft. And like, nowhere in people's bios or cover letters does anybody ever talk about the challenges or the thing where it's like, here's all the amazing things I've done, but like, here are the shows I like left because I honored my self-worth, you know, and like, here's all the things that I almost left the business over. Like, nobody ever really includes that information in their bios. And we all know that exists, but then we look at this and we go, wow, like, she's just like, going, crushing. She's probably had no challenges along the way. And we all know that's like the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah.
But it's that thing I've realized in doing so many episodes of this show that it's like this, it's an industry built on perception. So much of it is perception, but it's like almost a little like Truman Showy because we all know that it's all just like a facade, but like we still want the facade, and then we'll find out what's happening behind it. But we need the facade to feel like it's real, and then it's all right, let's look behind the curtain. You know?
Yeah. That's funny.
It's very bizarre. Yeah, it's a bizarre world we live in. And the more I talk to people like yourself who have a lot more experience and years behind them, the more I'm just like, well, we are a bunch of weirdos. That's for sure.
We are weirdos, and you have to stop and accept that we work with a bunch of fucking weirdos. So if we all just sort of know that about each other,
you have to be
it's kind of cool,
some degree of weird and a little off center to, I think, be attracted to this business. One, then actually find a way to sustain a life in this business, because it is not for the faint of heart. So,
well, and everybody's different. Like one thing that I've worked with, it's funny you bring up the idea of the bio of like, what do I think people perceive when they see it, is that I've worked with a tremendous amount of stand-up comics. And I think I knew kind of nothing about stand-up comics growing up, except, well, I thought I didn't. And then just the way my parents were and watching Saturday Night Live and introducing me to old movies that had like people like Shelley Berman in them, who I never thought in a million years I would meet and work with. And then I did on Curb. But people like that I actually grew up listening to stand-up comics, not even realizing it. And then I never in a million years set out or thought I'd work with stand-up comics. And I have worked with so many stand-up comics. And they are the most wonderful animal, strange breed on the planet, right?
They're really I did I had the wonderful privilege of working on a documentary that is we're still in post, but it's called Hysterical, and it's a look inside sort of the journey women of stand-up comedy. And so I spent a lot of time between here and New York going back and forth and shooting and just getting a true look behind the curtain of what that world is like and the hustle that is required, and especially for women. And then, of course, you have the outliers who shoot up, to the level of fame that most can't even imagine. But what it's actually like to be working comedy clubs, 5-6 nights a week and try to be a mom, like all of these realities of that world. And it was fascinating. And similar to you, it's interesting how when I came to America, so much of learning English and learning culture was through comedy and through watching, like my dad and I always watched Saturday Night Live. In fact, when I was like looking you up and studying you, I all I hear is like, my name is Sally O'Malley. Do you remember that character? And so I was like, I wonder how many times she's gotten that, because I was like,
what's funny? This is so fucking funny. I went millions of years with nobody ever making that reference to me.
It's time for a resurgence.
And me thinking that was hilarious that nobody knew that reference, because otherwise you would obviously make that reference to me, right?
Yes.
And then I became best friends with this script supervisor who is also now a director, and she's amazing. My friend Jillian, and she made that reference to me like 10 years ago. And I was like, you're the only person who's ever done that. But because we laugh on set and do that, we have introduced a whole generation of people to Sally.
Oh my God.
Sally O'Malley and just for fun. I'm not 50 yet, thank God. But we do that joke all the time. I'm 50 and
I mean, when you turn 50, you must have a Sally O'Malley themed birthday party.
I need to call her up and be like, hey, can you do this?
Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
by
already
the way,
producing your
most
birthday
talented,
party. Like, just hire me.
Super talented comedian, by the way. Speaking of
Molly, she's I don't know if you ever saw called Other People.
Yeah.
Is it called
forget about it.
Forget about it. But so growing up and comedy informed so much of like my taste and a lot of what I got into this business. And similar to you, like my path was so interesting, like all of us are. But now when I look back on a lot of the kinds of projects I've gotten to work on, and it's mostly indie features, but it's all comedy. It's like all comedy people. One of my first producing gigs was I produced Whitney Cummings' first, directorial debut. And it's like, wow, like awesome. I just keep like percolating in this world with comedians and comedy and funny people, which I'm not mad at, because it's fun. Yeah. It's a really good time. So with all that said, I mean, I'm so curious, because you said the perception of your path based on your credits is so different from how you got there. So take us to the beginning of how you discovered this business and that producing was a thing a person could do for money.
Wow. Yeah. Well, the really quick, super, super quick, but deep backstory is both my parents were school teachers and major film buffs and television nerds. They loved everything about that. And I didn't even know how much, while being like, my father was a history teacher and a Latin teacher. My mother was a literature teacher, English teacher. I was raised reading literature and around plays and stories and stuff, but they just found movies and stuff really exciting. And so they had a really good friend when I was a little kid who worked at a movie theater at the local university. And so we would go to their house and they'd project movies on the wall. So I remember being a real little kid and like seeing Casablanca and
wow.
and the Maltese Falcon and Out of Africa and stuff like projected on a wall, like move the bookshelf and get to watch it. So I think I fell in love with movies really, really young. And my parents watched all the amazing television shows, you know, from WKRP and MASH and Soap and all these amazing comedies. They weren't much for dramas or anything like that. It was always the half-hour comedies. So I grew up watching that, and so I was like a total science nerd as a little kid. But then I got into junior high and high school, and I decided I kind of wanted to act, wanted to try drama. So I went from a classroom of 16 kids at a parochial school to sort of a ginormous inner city arts, well, a magnet school that had arts program.
Mm-hmm.
So ship the white kids in because the entire school is Black and Mexican, and so I got to be one of the lucky kids who came. And so I took drama and I fell in love with it and fell in love with acting and theater. And so then I was like, well, I am going to be an actress and do just theater because that is
theater.
Yeah. Right?
Yes.
And then this amazing teacher was hired at our school to teach film acting. And suddenly I was like, oh, you mean we can make movies? And I really only, and I also took photography. We had an amazing photography school. So I just was sort of surrounded by this visual thing. Anyway, long story short is I realized I much more enjoyed being behind the camera than in front of it.
Mm.
And so I think surprised everybody. And for the university, I applied to all these film schools and I went to film school.
Wow.
And I got into film school. And so I'd been on an airplane twice in my life. I had never really traveled. So I got into NYU and I got into USC and I got into a couple other schools, but those were my top two. And I chose USC because it was California. Like I was sort of like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So I went to USC and I just went to film school. And while I was in film school, I did some acting and stuff, but I just was like, no, I think I directed a play in high school and stuff. And I think I just went, no, I think I could direct movies. I think I could. And so I went to film school with this idea that I was going to make and direct movies. And while I was in school, I just realized how much I loved making them. Not to say directors don't make them, but and I had this one really amazing professor that just sort of explained to me what a real producer does versus what a current producer did in his mind.
What was that definition like? Do you remember?
Yeah, in his mind, he hated the term line producer. He thought that had just been invented and that person was really a production manager and that a producer was really somebody who produced, who like had their fingers in all the pots and did all this stuff. And I remember, and he said, look, we need line producers. They're important. We need production managers. But if you're a producer, you're doing everything with the director, with the thing, the editor. And so I remember just getting out of school and feeling like, well, that's what I want to do. I want to have my fingers in all of the pots. And I don't know, I was trying to produce every graduate film I could and like, and just be involved. And they had this advisor guy who worked in the industry who took a liking to me. And he said, when you graduate, you should call me. I'll give you a job. And I think maybe little did he know that I was totally that kind of kid. So I was like, hi, remember when you told me to call you?
Yeah.
And I called him and he, basically I graduated on a Friday and on Monday I reported to work as a production coordinator on an ABC kids show. I had no fucking idea what I was doing. And he was a really good production manager, but he was a people person and he liked going out and talking to the people. So like a lot of the paperwork and all that stuff fell to me. And when the accountant who was really smart and intimidating said to me, well, but that breaks the union rule. I was like, it does? What's a union rule? He's talking about
what union?
What are you saying? So I remember I went home one night and I read the SAG agreement. and I didn't know that like you don't read the SAG agreement. So I read the SAG agreement from start to finish, and I was like, this is so fucking boring. But I'm like, okay, I guess I have to know this stuff. And I just assumed everyone did that. Yeah, I found out later not everybody does that. But anyway, so so I worked up through production and became a line producer, basically.
But on the TV side, you already
But on the TV side. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one day I had been let's see, I'd done a few shows, and one day I got a call. I'll never forget it, actually. I was at the original post office in Washington, D.C. on a vacation. Super weird. But anyway, side note. And I get a call from HBO, and they ask me, hey, there's this little show. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called Ali G, and it's really popular in Europe. And we're going to do an American version, really small crew, really small team. Would you want to produce it? And we'll make you full producer. And I was like, yes. Like, I just wanted to produce anything.
Yeah.
And then I figured out what this show was about and how crazy Sasha is. And but I loved it, and it was like throwing me in the deep end. And so that was the first show I ever produced, and that was when I realized that again, not to say line producers are the most important thing in the world, but I realized that I could sort of forge my own path. And that I didn't have to be a line producer because I didn't come to Hollywood to sign paychecks, you know?
Yeah.
And so I just said, I'll take care of that for you. I'll do that for you. And I just lent my brain and my heart to these showrunners. And that's when I realized that I could be, so for Sasha, I'd be like, I can help with this and this and this. That ran over into me working with Larry David on Curb, and Sarah Silverman on her show. Was I'd say to them, I'm more than your time card signer. Like, I can help you with locations and wardrobe and casting and editing, and I can help you with any of that. And I learned that what a producer is taking in television, that's a writer's medium, right? Taking their vision and helping them achieve it.
How, like, so when you were moving up in these different shows, you were still quote unquote the line producer, or had you already surpassed that? Meaning, what I'm curious is, were the other producers at any point looking at you being like, stay in your lane? Because I can't speak for television, but I find that in the feature space, which is my domain, sometimes there is a little bit of that, of like,
for sure.
You most people, to get into it, they don't want to just line produce. They are creative producers at heart and want to be more than just like the sign checker and the union intermediary and crew, whatever, all of that. But there is this, like, we all know the hierarchy here. So, like, we don't need you to get involved with creative thoughts on locations unless it's asked for. But, like, generally speaking, it's segregated in that way.
You know, it's funny. I've been asked that question before in different ways. And I'd like to think I haven't had much of a problem because I always approached it from a very, lack of better words. I don't mean this as sort of self-indulgent as it sounds, but from a very humble place of like, this isn't my show. This is your show. This is your vision. And I've been very good at, even if I don't agree with something necessarily creatively, that's not mine to push unless I'm asked. This is Sarah's vision. This is Larry's vision. And I'm there. So it's always come from a place where I've understood what everybody's role in, and I've understood that my job, I have a job. So when I was, still line producing, so to speak, with it, it was never like a pushy, I think I always did it respectfully. And I think to my own credit, I did it well enough that I obviously earned the reputation that I was good at it and trustworthy. And so somebody like Sarah could say to Larry, or Larry to Sarah, or whomever, oh, no, you should work with Erin because she gets it all done and she's like got your back. Like,
Yeah.
And I know for a fact, like that's how I met Liz Merriweather to do New Girl was I had done a pilot with Joni Marchenko and had been that person for her, and the pilot didn't move forward. But meanwhile, Liz had done the New Girl pilot, which I didn't do the New Girl pilot, but she'd done the New Girl pilot with another producer, was looking for a new producer for series. And she reached out to Joni, and Joni said, oh, you got to take my producer from this pilot I just did. She'll have your back. She'll do that. And she quickly learned I was that right-hand person. So, but the answer I was going to say to you is I've been asked this question before. And to be honest, the only time I had pushback on like a certain production manager level of dealing with crew was from a man. The only time I've had 2 shows, which we will not speak of, that I had major issues with another creative female producer who felt threatened by my presence. And I could psychoanalyze that to the end of the earth as to why those specific people had issues and why that was happening. But it made me wary enough that there is a problem in our industry of women being so on guard that they're even on guard with other women, obviously.
Do you feel like that is changing a bit? Because I feel like I would say you've been in TV now 20 years. Is that safe to say? So in your 20 years, you've lived now through the Me Too movement and all of the great movements that are helping shine a new light on this very real problem and concern. But my perception in some conversations I've had is older women who've even older than you, I think, who've come before us and who've sort of really had to truck through the mud to get where they are. There's a sense of that scarcity mentality of like, you don't know what I had to do to get here, so I'm not going to make your life easier. I'm not going to go easy on you.
Yeah, that's a fucking bummer.
And it's a bummer, right?
It's like a real bummer.
It's a fucking bummer because it's like no one is discounting or discrediting what you have done and the roads you've paved so we can all get a little further ahead. But that attitude is just such from a spiritual level. You know what I mean? It's like how
can you imagine can you imagine if I mean, maybe this is a bad example, but can you imagine if somebody like John Lewis had done the last speech he did, the last, letter he did to all of us that was to be released on his death, if he had said, don't forget what I did for you. That tone, what I mean?
It's terrible.
That is the most not empowering, it's encouraging words at all. Instead he goes, look what we've done together and what you can do better than I did, because now you have room to do it.
Yeah.
That's the point, right?
Well, yes. To quote Hamilton, which I do want to get to because of your love for theater, it's like you have no control who tells your story.
Yeah.
It's like these women who behave this way, the stories that are going to be repeated about them, despite the work, that they maybe have done, is likely to be unfortunate and maybe not fully representative of their contributions. And that's unfortunate. But I
agree.
Do you feel like that it has changed? It has evolved since you started to where you are now?
Well, I know for me personally, just directly on that subject, I am giving it less weight than I used to give it, because if I encounter a woman now, whether she's my peer or she's older than me or whatever, and there is an issue with her in that regard, I just let that be what that is. It's not about me, and I just don't take it personally, and I move past it and I work with it. And I feel very, very empowered to and obligated to hire women, to encourage young women, to encourage young men of color. I feel like it's my job, it's my duty, right? And so it's I hire a lot of women. I try to hire a lot of female directors. in the last 5 years, it's been trying to hire a lot of directors of color, male or female. So I just feel like if you want to just pay it forward, pay it forward, pay it forward. And it's not about what I paid before. The only joke I ever make, which you could talk to people who work with me who are younger than me. The only joke I ever make is I'm like, I can't believe you guys get a script change at 10 o'clock at night and you just hit a button and email it to 200 people. I said, I used to sit out there, in the snow.
Back in my day, kid, with a cigarette.
I go, we had a thing called a Thomas guide. And I tried to explain to them what a Thomas guide is. And I go, you understand? It was like this huge book. And it cost $46. And you could only buy it at the gas station or at like a drugstore. And nobody would reimburse you for it. So that was like half your fucking rent. And you had to go buy the stupid Thomas guide. God. And it sat in the backseat of my car. And you're always worried somebody's going to steal your Thomas guide. So you'd hide it under the seat. I mean, the Thomas guide was like, and so I tried to explain to people. I remember like, I was telling them about, I remember like the president of Fox, I had to deliver tapes to him for post. And he wanted one delivered at his house, one at the office set on his desk. So there I am in the Thomas guide, 2 a.m. He lives in frickin' Bel Air. I'm driving around Bel Air in the dark. We don't have cell phones. We don't have any of that shit. Oh. I'm like with a flashlight and the Thomas guide trying to find his house. So find his house. Safe. This huge gate with all these like greens. And like there's literally, I mean, like out of a movie, there's literally like Doberman pinchers, like dogs on the other side. I can't go in there. So I'm taking this tape and I'm like, and I like chuck it and it like goes over and it lands on his doorstep. And I'm like, I'm amazing, and then I have to drive to his office and leave it on his desk, So I'm like, you guys got it easier. So that shit, I make fun of them all the time.
I don't think that's making fun of. I think that's a keeping them in check. You know what I mean? Because it's important to remember how things were. I mean, I've only been here 14 years only. It's like a long time. It's where I've lived the longest, honestly. But like when I came out here, the iPhone hadn't come out yet. Like I had to print out, like MapQuest and Thomas guides. Like I had to print out directions and drive while reading and and then if you got lost, you had to pull over at a gas station and ask somebody like how you got to where you were going.
You only know Los Angeles by driving Los Angeles. That's the only way you know it. You just have to keep driving it.
It makes no sense. I mean, especially when you're going into the mountains and stuff. And so,
I still don't understand the valley. When people tell me that Burbank is like an east-west street, I'm like, what are you talking about? That makes no sense. Like, I'm like, no, it's not. It goes like this. That's north-south. And they're like, no, Erin. Like, I don't get it. I'm like, the whole valley doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense at all. I agree with that. But, so you survived, obviously, your first chapter in LA, it sounds like, because you sustained with all of the things. And so at what point would you say you felt like maybe there was a big transition into, because sometimes we get stuck doing a certain type of producing for a while and we're like, this is great, but the next tier is like this next thing that I want to be doing. What was that for you, and at what point did you figure out how to make that leap to that next phase of your career?
Well, I privately, secretly always knew I really wanted to direct. But just like what you and I were talking about earlier, I kind of knew my place, and I knew that everybody wanted to direct, and that me saying, hey, I want to direct an episode if you trust me by season 2 or 3 was still going to sound like, oh, fuck, she wants to direct, so I knew that. I knew my place. But the more and more shows I produced and had this right-hand partnership with the showrunner, the more I knew I could do it. And the more you do that, the more, I mean, I wasn't just prepping the guest directors for the next episode. I was sitting on set with them while they're directing and saying, I think you need to do a couple more takes, and I think you need to go a little tighter because Liz likes it a little tighter in the edit. Like, I was doing it,
Mm-hmm.
And people started to say to me, like script supervisors and DPs and stuff, like, Erin, why aren't you just directing one? Like, why are we dealing with this middleman person. And I was like, because I got a job. I got a job to do. I got to produce. I got to,
Yeah.
But it took some people who were very close to me, particularly my wife. It took a few people to say to me, no one's going to ever give you that unless you tell somebody you want it or you ask for it. And I was like, okay. And the big turn, I feel like I had a big turning point when I did Curb, that Larry gave me a lot of creative freedom and there was a lot of collaboration on set behind the monitors with Larry and me and the other writers who were supporting him, who we had known and trusted forever, and the director. Like, we all sort of collaborate, and I felt like that sort of opened my world to then work with people like Sarah Silverman and stuff, and do all of that. But when I got a new girl, Liz was a very young new showrunner. She had two great showrunners, Brett and Dave, who were helping her in the writer's room. And then she had me, who was sort of obviously producing, organizing that side of things. And we were all just sort of collaborative. And after 2 or 3 years, which were really kind of rough years of long hours and lots of script changes and actors working 14-hour days and crew working 16-hour days, and just a really rough go of it. We had one particularly rough season. She sat down during a hiatus and said, okay, I got to change things. We got to make this better. People have to have lives, and she was trying to really trying to really be a grown up of like, this is my show. People are looking at me. I'm going to lead. And she really made some significant changes. Well, with that, she also recognized who she needed to keep close, I think.
Yeah.
And she said to me, she sat me down. We went and had like breakfast or something at Hugo's. And she said to me, I don't want you to leave. I'm worried you're going to leave because it's so hard to produce this show. And I was like, I'm not going to leave, but she's like, I'm worried you're going to leave. She's like, I want to give you something to do. She's like, everyone knew I had acted and stuff. She's like, do you want to play a role in the show coming up? Or do you want to direct an episode? Or do you, like, what can I do to sort of thank you or do something? And it was like, I was just being handed this opportunity to ask for what I want. I said, I want to direct it. She's like, everyone says you should direct one. I said, I want to direct one. She's like, all right. And I directed one and it went really well. and then we had a guy who was supposed to direct, and it's such a long story, but he dropped out like on a Sunday night. And so everybody's like, somebody has to direct tomorrow. So they're like, Erin, you do it. So then I directed again, and it just started happening. And that was obviously the next big turning point of doing that. And then from now on, being able to, approach shows with other showrunners, of doing their pilots, producing their pilots, but really sort of creating them with them, so to speak, on a level, of like, I didn't write them, I didn't whatever, but saying, well, instead of the soccer game, could it be a this and that, making suggestions and doing all that stuff, and being really collaborative and then me spending a lot of time in the edit. I don't know. Did I answer your question?
You did. No, I sometimes yes, I was like forgetting that I was supposed to ask you another question because I was just like, tell me more.
I'm a real chatty Cathy.
All your stories are fascinating. No, but I'm just so curious because since so much of my experience is like deeply rooted in like the indie space, TV fascinates me. And it seems like a very organized world in terms of delineations of responsibilities. And because it is a writer's medium, what is that path like as a non-writing producer? And what does that dynamic, to your point of working with the showrunner as a non-writing producer, what does that look like?
For me, what it's looked like, I don't know about others, but for me, what it's looked like is the showrunner coming to me with, obviously I'll have scripts or whatever, but let's say we know a big story arc is about to happen, and will come to me and go, hey, I thought of this idea. What happens if Will loses his job? And or what happens if Angie's house burns down and she has to live in a thing and has to move in with Douglas? And I go, oh, okay. And so from one side, I'm thinking of it in a practical way of like, how are we going to burn down the house? How are we going to burn down the set? Like, I'm thinking that this practical thing. And then on the other side of it, I say to her, well, the other practical side of me is changing the logistics. Oh, that means we're going to have to shoot, Leighton in the Douglas house a lot. That means, what does that do with our permanent sets? Like, I'm thinking practically. But then other times, but then I weigh in. JJ would say to me, "Do you think that's too dramatic? Do you think that, or do you think that's funny, or do you think?" And I'll go, "I think it's really good for her character," and we'll like sort of talk. And so she wants me to weigh in on that stuff. And then as the script develops, I constantly weigh in on the practical things that are going to be difficult, just from a producer standpoint, but also from a director standpoint. And then I weigh in as a director standpoint creatively, from a director standpoint. I go, you did this one thing, but one thing you don't know is that we have this really funny visual set at the something something. If that scene took place there instead, that would be so big and funny. And, JJ would go, "Oh, great, let's do that." So it would be me giving notes, so to speak, in that way. And we would develop in that way. And then once we're shooting, I'm on set as much as I can, dealing with whomever is directing, or if I'm directing, and just weighing in on performance a lot, and hitting. I'm just constantly there trying to make sure what JJ wrote or Liz wrote is really getting nailed by this guest director who has a tremendous job to do being a guest, right? And then just by the actors who get a little comfortable in where they're at and go, "No, I got it." I'm like, "Well, FYI, this is a really significant line, because what you don't know is in 3 episodes from now, we might have you guys kiss, or we might have you in a fight, or we might, and oh, okay." I'm like, so we kind of want to get a couple versions just in case. Okay, great. And then when the show is shot, the way I would be this non-writing producer is I'd go in the edit, and I would sit with the editor and give a lot of editing notes. And just so the thing I didn't do was break the story in the room and do the physical writing. But it's a lot of hands-on creation together of story and
yeah. I mean, it's insane the amount of macro and micro you have to keep in your head at all times. It sounds like, not just from the creative, but from, like you said, the production aspect, and how does this impact all of these things. It's like you have 2 hats, and within either hat there's smaller, tinier hats,
Yeah, right.
Underneath, if you pull it out, it's like, yeah.
And somebody like JJ, they have such a tremendous amount of work to do to just conceive of these stories,
right?
Much less have to freaking write them.
Right.
And everything is riding on that. If you make that one story, you're stuck with that potentially for the rest of the season, certainly for the next 2 or 3 episodes. So
yeah,
that's a rough going situation, right? So for me to take off, for her to have conceived of a giant bear suit or whatever the crap it is, and me go, "Okay, you know what? You have a bear suit in mind. I'm going to go find the 4 best bear suits that I think are funny. And then you and I'll choose a bear suit together." So I just would take that extra work off their shoulders.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, it's such a cool collaboration. It feels like it's a longer, more, you have to have a lot more stamina version of what we do in the feature world, where it's still like that, but you get the bear suit, and if it doesn't work, you can cut it because it's a feature, and maybe it doesn't work. You know what I mean? For like the long run, you don't have to find ways to sustain it and explain it. If it becomes like a gimmick, right, and then it gets really great. Right. Now it becomes like the next season's all about the bear suit, and no one could have predicted.
For us, like, the bear suit could be like the out of the second act, and if the bear suit doesn't work, you're screwed. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Liz Merriweather has this really funny story. She's told a couple of times about me when we've done interviews together or whatever, where she said, "Erin's the kind of producer, you go to her," and she said this really happened, that she walked into me and said, "So I'm writing a script where I think I want a horse to eat a pair of pants." Can that happen? And she said, I don't even totally remember this, but she said that I looked at her kind of blankly for a minute and was real quiet for like 10 seconds. And I went, yeah, let me make some calls. and she, and that's that like, I laugh every time she tells that story because I don't really totally remember it, but I believe it entirely.
Yeah.
And to me, that does sort of sum up our relationship because I always said to line producers I've spoken to, producers, whatever, I said, the word no should never be in your vocabulary. There's no no. Look what the 6 million movies have been made.
Yeah.
Million hours of television have been made. And we've seen some crazy, crazy shit.
Yes.
Crazy shit for lots of money, crazy shit for no money. So the word no is just like the word difficult, harder, yes, but those words all exist.
Those are all good. Yes.
But no is kind of like not a real thing,
I think the good one is always just like, let me look into it.
Let me make some calls.
Let me make some calls. Let me explore this.
Yeah.
Let's see what's possible. I mean, I think you nailed it. It's like whether you're talking about independent film, which tends to have a set of challenges that are inherent, I think that are quite different from television. It's the attitude of that collaboration of like there is always a solution to figuring it out, and it's always going to be at the behest of whatever the sandbox is that you have to play in, right? Your budget, your like the time, all of those things have to be taken into consideration. And it's like, you study some of the greats of our time, and the best creativity comes from not a no, but like having to pivot because the way you thought for sure it was going to be and no longer is. I mean, I think Jaws is like a perfect example of that. They never
100%.
showed the shark because the shark didn't work.
Also, the Jaws example is, it's the classic one, but it's also the reason it's a classic one is because it's so good that you can say on one level, would the movie have been as popular? Would if it weren't as popular, would Spielberg had as much of a launch pad as he had? So would he have done? You forget all of that. What I go to is he learned a very valuable lesson, as did the producers, as did the writer. I mean, everyone learned a very valuable lesson in that of like, wow, I could do this a little different. And it just instills in you the next time, it could have still been a really popular movie. Who knows?
Right. Yeah.
But to say that didn't change how he handled things creatively moving forward would be a lie, right?
Yeah.
No matter what, it influenced him.
Yeah.
And letting, I feel like that happens particularly with directing, but also with producing. It happens to me all the time where you encounter something with an actor and their reaction or whatever has happened, you go, oh, shit, that never occurred to me. And then you call upon that later. With producing, it would be that of me going to Liz and going, you know what, it's going to be we can do it. But if you really want this to take place at a circus, this, and this, you're going to have to sacrifice, and we'll have to do this, and it'll only be this. So it won't be like the circus you think. It's going to be like this circus. And, explain that.
Yeah.
I'm like, or it could take place at a playground, and you could have this, and this, and this, and this. And and it helps writers and showrunners to this is where I always say, you don't say no. You give them some options. That's why I've always made the joke too that I'm the worst producer, because I'm like, nah, fuck it, let's spend the money. You're right, it's better. But anyway, that I've almost felt guilty that I've talked them out of it. 5 days have gone by. They've been working on rewrites based on me talking them out of it. Now I've sort of figured out a way to do the original idea because I love it so much. I go back to them, I go, we can do it. And they go, we don't want to do it.
Oh,
it's a new idea.
You're like, no.
This idea has led to something better. And it did. It led to something better for them thematically or in a character development or something that now I'm like, no, but the circus is going to be really visually cool. And they're like, nope, doesn't matter. This is going to be more grounded and centered and blah, blah, blah. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what's so unique about what we do. I like to hope surgeons and cancer researchers and whatever are doing that in their ORs and their labs talking to each other, coming up with that kind of stuff. I would like to think
so. I'd like to think so.
I definitely think we're super unique with it. But
yeah, I think we have to real time problem solving in a way that I would hope surgeons don't necessarily have to do. Like on the table, be like, shit, what do you think? What should we have 2 seconds to decide.
Yeah,
you know, I
that's
would hope
rough.
they have a little more prep than we get. But but what do you think is a big misconception that people who maybe are in the business or not in the business have about television, making television, TV producers? Is there like a thing that maybe you keep hearing that you're like, ugh, no, this is not it. It's this.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, that's funny because the bigger thing I get all the time is, what do you do?
Oh, yeah.
They don't really understand what we do.
No.
To the point, I've had my daughters on set since they were babies, millions of times. They see what I do, and you really can only understand what we do unless you see it, right? That's like the big thing. It's so hard to explain it. But my daughter had taken my iPad a couple months ago. I noticed mid-COVID, and I got the iPad back, and I was looking at Safari, and I noticed that there was a page open, and I was like, what's that? And I open it, and she had Googled, what does an executive producer do? With a question mark. Like on her own, she was still trying to figure out what the hell I did. You know?
I'm sure Google did not help
her. Did not help her very well. Yeah. I know, it was really interesting of like what came out. But yeah, I get the bigger question I get is what do we do? What is really our job?
Yeah, how would you define that then?
It's impossible. It's what I just said. Like you can't know unless you. They're like, well, do you hire crew? And I go, yeah, sometimes. Like, well, do you do schedules? And I go, yeah, I totally look at the schedules and deal with schedules. Well, do you know what I mean? Like you can't.
It's like she's making it all up. It's a made up job.
Yeah. I guess the thing that people are always surprised about is how much time it takes. That's the thing. Like my friends who are engineers or work at nonprofits or, who have tough brain moving, intense jobs, nurses. I have a friend who's a nurse, they do not understand why on earth I'd be at work for 14 to 15 hours a day. They don't. Right. That seems mind-boggling. It almost makes them feel like I can tell they don't want to say it, but like, you're doing something wrong, Erin, that you're there. That, you know what I mean? Like they think it's, and I'm like, no, that was like the bare minimum today.
Well, I've had people who are not in the business try to give me advice on how to make sets more efficient. And I'm like, yeah, if you figure out the solution, I would love to be the person that takes that to my industry and revolutionizes how we do production. I would love that.
Wow.
I accept your nomination for this challenge, but
that I will be the person who
but I would say that in like 100 years of production, like if someone had figured out a better way, they probably would have shared it with us. Like they wouldn't keep it to themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's just really too many humans coming together to collaborate, and that's the problem. Like you have 100 people doing a thing. It just takes time.
Yeah, when you have 100 voices, personalities, and 50 of them got in a fight with their wife that morning.
Yeah.
God knows what you're in for. But we spend so many hours together, so much time in such proximity at the weirdest times, at 2 a.m., at 4 a.m., at 6 in the morning. My AD will go, yeah, okay, I'll be right there. He goes, I just got to go call Rocco and just say goodnight to him. I go, okay, he's got to go call his son. I know who Rocco is. I know this that time of day. He's got to go say goodnight to his son. He's like, 5 minutes. I go, yep, I know it's going to be only 5 minutes because that's how long he takes to say goodbye to Rocco.
Well, but he's an AD, I would hope so.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But you know what I mean? It's that thing that we all know so much about each other. We're so
intimate,
entwined in our lives that to suddenly not work together.
Yeah.
It's really hard. But I also think, I don't know if you saw any of the stuff this week at Kate Blanchett is she's, heading up the Venice Film Festival.
Yeah. I read her.
And she said that whole thing about if there was ever an industry though, who could pave the way of how to get back to work because we care about it so much about working together.
that's the secret sauce. Everybody I've spoken to who has found longevity in this business operates in some level. They believe that, that it really is about the journey you're going on with these people. And if everything is transactional and you're just trying to get on top of someone else to get where you're going, like, I don't think you're going to have, maybe you get to where you're going, but you're going to be very alone over there. And that's going to suck,
In April or early May, I was overseeing 2 shows, Bless This Mess and Single Parents. And in the same day, ABC canceled both of them. We were already in COVID. We were already anxious about, how long is this going to last? When can the shows come back?
Yeah.
And in the same day, ABC took away both our shows. And Liz Merriweather and JJ Philbin and I got on the phone, and we were so sad and devastated that both our shows were gone. But at the same time, the first thing we did to kick into gear in our sadness was to call every department head and every actor and personally tell them that the shows were canceled before they saw it on the news, and to tell them how sorry we were.
Yeah.
Because in one moment, I had 400 people lose their jobs that they were depending on in August,
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking for me and for JJ and Liz and Catherine Pope and all these wonderful producers I work with. It's just, for all of us, we do feel a sense of responsibility for all of them, and we need every single one of them. And we know that without them, we can't make this show. So it does become not even just about the project we're making. It's what you just said. It's the project we're making with these people.
It's the people. Yeah. I mean, it requires tremendous energy and stamina. So I'm curious how you feel you're well. Obviously, you're here 20 years into a thriving career with much more to go, but to have that consistent stamina and switching gears, to the theme of the podcast and talking about the messy parts of our journeys and the moments, months, years, whatever that has looked like for you, where things weren't clicking or things weren't happening, and periods of frustration, and for me personally, like periods of depression, periods of like self-worth being tied in my producing life and feeling like it's so hard, it's so demanding. Is this forever going to be this way? Can I sustain this? Is it worth it? And having to grapple with these like existential crises, which I feel like I have every like 2 to 3 months, just period. And I just embrace it.
We all do.
I just embrace it.
By the way, a lot, the most successful people are hopefully still having that existence.
Good. That is so so nice to hear. We're all just like always like, what the fuck am I doing? Because it is like you said, it requires so much energy and love and care into all of it, because you have to care at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. You have to care once you're plugged in, you cannot check out. Like, it's just not that kind of job. So we take on so much of this energy and of this baggage, the good, the bad, all of it, and how to reconcile with that and like release some of that so that you too can be a wife and a mother and have these other parts of your life, so you can be a whole person and then show up and be that whole version of yourself for your teams and for your collaborators and do it time and time again. So a lot of questions wrapped up in one there. So I don't even know what the question is, but it's more of just like, how do you?
There's a few things that I think of when you say all that. One thing I think of is, first of all, I recently I just had this conversation last night with a couple of really dear friends about our parents and old people dying in COVID and losing their partners, and this is a little off track, but being spent 40 years married, so connected that they have no autonomy. So when they lose a partner, they've like, well, what do I do now? Like, they have nothing they can do.
Yeah.
And I think the same sort of, in a strange, it made me think of it at least, the same sort of goes with us in Hollywood, is that we pour our hearts and our tears and literally our health into creating these projects. But you can't forget that you're a human being on this planet and that you have things that you care about, which is why I still did get married and I still did have children. And I remember wanting to have a baby so bad and thinking, well, this isn't a really convenient time. What happens when the baby comes and I have that show and this and this and this? And it was my mother-in-law and my mom, but it was my mother-in-law who said, "You know what? There's never a good time to have a baby. Just have the baby. You'll figure it out," you know? And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh." And taking that advice, thank Jesus Lord I did, because, like, I have 2 beautiful children
Yeah.
and I have a family. And you do have to prioritize. You have to stop. I remember one time, many years ago, Rob Reiner said to me that he didn't take meetings or calls or work on weekends because he said, my family knows that Monday through Friday I have a job and that Saturdays and Sundays I'm at home with them and I don't have a job. And he said, and I also, he was in a position to be able to do this,
Right.
obviously. This,
Right.
this goes with a little grain of salt. But he also said, I don't take a meeting after 7 o'clock at night. I don't go and do nighttime meetings or whatever.
Dinners. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I have to be with my family, just family time. So I think there's a balance you have to find, first of all, to be
Mhm.
able to have that autonomy so that you can be home and be in a bad mood and be with your family and be happy and then go to work and have the work shit, right? Have your work family. Um, but I also think for me as a producer and a leader, because I finally had to say to myself, oh no, you are leading these people. That's not a holier than thou high and mighty thing. They're looking to you for leadership and to set the tone. So if you're taking a script and throwing it across the stage because you're pissed or you're getting mad or you're whatever, well, that's what that's what mom's doing. And that you don't want to see
Yeah.
mom do it. So you
Yeah.
learn by example that if you're calm and cool, and by the way, when you see the guy grumpy in the meeting and he's been a sort of a jerk the whole time, if after the meeting you take him aside privately and go, hey, you okay? You seem a little, something's bothering you. And he goes, my father-in-law had a heart attack yesterday, and you go, "Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
All right. If you need anything, you let me know, okay? Like, we're here." "Oh, okay." Suddenly, that sort of just acknowledgement that they're human beings
Yeah.
leads to just all this tremendous trust and love that you can get through these weird times, and so I have found that it's always, it sounds a little silly, cliche, I don't know, but to just be truthful.
Yeah.
I go into a meeting and I go, "Oh, I'm so mad you can't make that deal with that guy. I'm so mad. Like, why can't we get that house?" I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at the thing, if I'm
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
then they go, "You know what? I'm going to go make that deal." Like, it's like suddenly it's like, it like causes some, just, there's no reason to be grumpy or mean. We're, on one hand, keep it in perspective. We're not curing cancer. We really aren't,
No,
you know,
we certainly are
but
not.
But at the same time, what we're doing is really worthwhile, and so
Yeah.
it's worth doing well, but it's never worth doing disrespectfully.
Yeah.
So, if you could sort of keep all of that somehow in mind and remember we have the best job on earth. It's so fun what we
Yeah.
do if you allow it to be fun. And paying the bills sucks, and am I doing the right show? And
Yeah.
somehow that always falls back to, though, to me again, being truthful. Do I believe in this work? Do I believe in this person's vision? Do I believe in my vision in it? If I don't, then I got to question what I'm doing.
Yeah. So what anchors you then? What's your truth? What's your why? What's that thing that you come back to?
Um, for me personally, it's like evolved. I think before I just wanted to do really funny, good things that showed all sorts of people, which is why, and really, div- you know, I don't know, divulge some truths that people didn't want. I liked it when Sarah Silverman would like talk about shit that nobody wanted to talk about, and in really like crazy ways, and Larry obviously, and Sacha Baron Cohen.
Yeah.
But I was so young and not learned of the world enough that now I'm like, oh, I want to do an episode about a transgender man who da da da. Like, now I have like, specific
Yeah.
thing you want to do. you get more focused and you get, so to me, that's it, of like doing truth and not being afraid to say to somebody who you think is smart and open and loving and caring and intelligent and wonderful, that joke's wrong. Why is it wrong? Because it's offensive, because it's coming from a place that you don't realize. Oh, like to not be afraid to fight against the work that you think's not right, but not be afraid to fight for the work you do. I mean, the number of times we have to sit in studio notes or network notes, and in the past, it's getting better. I mean, you're talking about that people you've talked to said it's getting better. It is getting so much better. 20 years ago, the way I would have had to fight for a gay joke or a gay character or a bisexual joke or something like that, or a pro-Islamic something, like the way I would have had to fight for something like that 20 years ago, that I have a much easier time fighting for now is tremendous to me.
Yeah, it's always wild when we watch something even from 10 years ago and you're like, huh, oh, right. Like this was funny at one point. Like this is where we just were as a society. This is what was acceptable.
Have you had the Friends conversation?
No.
I have talked to so many people. Okay, for some reason during COVID, the TV show Friends has been like running on loop. So everybody's rewatched Friends.
Yeah, it's a comfort for like the world. I get that.
There is so much homophobia.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, there is so much in that show that none of us realized 25 years ago when we were watching it, 30 years ago. And so I keep having the Friends conversation. A friend will say to me, "Have you been watching Friends?" I mean, no insult to the creators of Friends. I'm just saying.
Yeah. We've come a long way.
I thought that was it was a very progressive, open-minded, groundbreaking.
Yeah. I try to look at that instead of frustration of like, oh God, yeah, look at us, we were blah, blah, blah. But like, look how far we've come. Look how much growth and change is possible. And that these tiny ripples, sometimes we feel like we can't see the results of these ripples. When you zoom out, it's like, oh shit, this is a tsunami over 10 years, but it all took these tiny little ripples of people like yourself being like, let's rethink this. This is why it's insulting. This is why you may not see it this way because you have this lens on the world, but all these other people are going to see it this way, and I think having the courage to speak up for, problems that are not your own. I think that is another big responsibility that we carry as producers, I believe, to be like, let's just not use that language, or let's not, let's just really.
Well, and have you noticed that with Me Too? I mean, I've noticed such a difference since Me Too.
I honestly,
in just 2 years.
I honestly have to say, like, up until the Me Too movement, I definitely had prided myself in being like a girl who could hang with the boys. I very much was all about like, oh, like I'm not really friends with girls. Like I'm one of the guys. I can hang with them. Like we can be at a bar and they can talk shit about women. And I'm like, yeah, she's got a big ass. Like I used to be that person, and I prided myself in being that way. And after the Me Too movement, I started to realize like, oh, I'm an asshole. Like I am not supporting my fellow women. I am not out here actually looking at women through this lens that I want people to look at me through. Like, what a hypocrite, And it really, while I fortunately didn't have any personal experiences that mirror some of these women who were so brave to come forward, it just made me realize, like, the power of unity and the power of shared experiences. And even though it has not happened to me, it's not about me. It's about standing up and being this ally for women, period, and I had not been that way. It's interesting because the moment I started to lean into my femininity and the things that make women inherently different from men, and the things that we bring to the table, it made me stronger as a producer. It made me more connected to myself. And it just made the ride that much worth it to be like, I'm never going to be this way again. I recognize that I too had this thinking that was shadowed by a lot of hyper masculine things that I grew up believing were truths about women and myself. But I'm going to now devote my life to empowering other women, to empowering my fellow Latinas, and to helping amplify and give opportunities, and really being an ally and being like, I don't know, but how can I help? And every step of the way. And I feel gratitude that I think this podcast is an extension of that. I get to do that in my work, but I also get to, invite I'm very selective with the people I choose to have on. And I really selfishly, it's like every person I bring on is here to mentor me and through me, the listener. Monologue ending, but like it's very important to me. And now it's like it changed everything for me in I think a really great way. And so yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. No, great. I can hear it. I can hear it in your voice. That's fantastic.
Very passionate about it. But I wanted to wrap up with, for anybody listening who wants to mirror some of the career choices you've made and dreams of becoming a television producer who then gets to direct, what advice would you give for that person, whether they're starting their career or they're mid-career?
Oh God, there's so many like little things I've said over the years that are all true. They just sort of, every situation is slightly different. I know one thing I've said in the past because it works for me, but you know what? I know every situation's different, but if you get offered a couple of opportunities and one opportunity doesn't feel like it's your path, but it's a successful path to something else and it's more money, or you get offered the opportunity that you think is closer to your path and it's more what you want to do, but it's less money, like there's some suffering that goes with it. Don't be so quick to just be afraid of the unemployment, be afraid of all of that. Like I had a guy tell me one time, and this is the advice. When approaching a choice of opportunities, always pretend you have $1 million in the bank and decide then, okay, so if I had $1 million in the bank and it didn't matter, what's the thing I just want to do and I feel like I can do? And then explore that. That doesn't mean that's the right decision, but explore it, because I feel like there's a million billion people who are in this industry, and 80% of them barely get to ever work, right? 90% of them get to barely ever work. So we're in a very, very, very big, big ocean with lots and lots of fish. And there's a handful of people who get to really make a career out of it. And some of that I think actually is luck. I really do. But I also think talent and truthfulness and perseverance will get you 90% there. And so I've always taken care of the people around me. I've never stepped on anybody's head or shoulders in a negative way to get where I wanted to be. I've always, when the one guy got fired, I went in and quit too. Like, I've been truthful and honest, and
integrity.
So you have to have the integrity in order to to live with yourself, I think. But
Yes.
I think it helps, and I think eventually the bad are weeded out. Now there's always the exception.
Yes.
Harvey Weinstein's of the world or whatever.
But they eventually get theirs.
But they eventually get theirs.
Yeah.
I really believe that. And the truth is, now that I've been in the business for so long, I know a lot of people who work in the business who are shitheads. But everyone I talk to knows they're shitheads. And so, okay, they're working and they're successful, but everyone knows they're a shithead.
Yeah.
So you want to be that guy? Like, you don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. Don't be that guy.
So don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy.
So be kind. I mean, I really mean it. Be kind, have integrity. Don't crush anybody to get ahead. That's not going to do any good. But work hard, network, do all that shit. And then the other thing I always tell everybody is what I touched on earlier, is that don't think you're a mind reader. No one can read your mind. No one knows what they just can't, and they shouldn't. And they're so busy dealing with themselves. They're not thinking about you. They're not thinking about what pants you're wearing. They really aren't. My wife teases me all the time. I'll be like, do you think the shirt's okay for the thing? And she go, she goes, I go, and she go, well, yeah, why not? And I go, well, I wore it last week for the something. And she'll go, I want you to name me one outfit that one other person was wearing at that event. And I'll go, I can't think of one. She goes, exactly. Wear the fucking shirt. Like, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
okay. So just, I guess, I don't know where I was going with that.
It's a great example.
But I think my point was like, just be who you are. No one can read your mind. Say what you want.
I think so much of it is tact, and it's this thing you can't quite teach. It just takes a little bit of like trial and error sometimes, unfortunately. Just like the finesse of like knowing how to speak your truth and what you want without demanding it and imposing it on somebody and making it. I think it's like if you're coming from a place of curiosity, I think it's always going to be met with like received well, you know, if you're like, yeah, I'm totally doing this and I like love this and I'm great at this, but I'm actually really curious about this as well. And I would love to learn more about this as well.
People can't know anything about you.
Yeah.
I mean, no one would know based on my career that my dream job in the whole world would be to direct a Broadway show. That would be like my dream. Like
which Broadway show would you direct if you could?
Oh, anything. Give me one.
Okay, you get to have your pick, right? You get to dream big of all the shows.
I get to like reprise one.
Okay, yeah. Let's say you get to reprise a Broadway show, any show you want.
Cabaret.
In
a second.
Oh my God,
Cabaret.
It's a really good show.
It's a really good show.
But speaking of shows, I want to know as we wrap up, since Hamilton obviously has taken the world by storm, I'm assuming you're a big Hamill fan.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Which Hamilton character would you say you are? And does it conflict with the Hamilton character you wish to be? And there is a quiz, by the way, that you can take to find the answer. I can send it to you.
This is such a good question.
Yeah, that's how we'll close out.
You know, I think in some ways, I started out as kind of Eliza or Aaron Burr in the sense of like, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. Don't cause any waves. I'm going to be smart and successful and achieve, but I'm going to do what's expected of me. I feel like that was kind of who I was for a long time when I started, which is a good foundation of people trusting you, right?
Yeah.
And still getting ahead. And then I think I found sort of the Angelica in myself. And I found you know what I mean? Like, yes, I found sort of
what you mean.
The Angelica, and even maybe a little bit of the Jefferson in me of like, hey, I got this. Look at me. Come on, guys.
Come on. Yeah.
Let's get this going. And like, all right. You know, I feel like I got a little of that in me now.
Yeah.
With confidence and lots of therapy and
love it. Therapy's the best.
Yeah, right? Like
yeah.
That's funny. That's a great question. I love it. That's awesome.
I love how much
I'm gonna go home and ask.
Please, you should ask everybody that question. It's a wonderful question. Yeah, but thank you for humoring that. I know you love theater and musicals. So I was like, oh my God, I wonder what she's gonna say. Well, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to share yourself and a little bit of your journey with me and the listeners. You are a delight of a human, and I would love to meet you outside of this screen.
I love you doing this. It's so amazing.
Thank you.
I was listening to some of your interviews, and they're just so this. Like, I just felt like right at ease.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to meet in person.
Yes.